When my best friend Ricardo and I were 19, we enjoyed our summers down at the Jersey Shore, thanks to our well-off North Jersey families. My house was in Belmar, New Jersey, and his was in Lavallette. One random summer night during the week, Ricardo was driving us from my house in Belmar to his in Lavallette, which was about an hour away. Honestly, I preferred hanging out with Ricardo's house. Not only because it was nicer, but also because the general vibe of Lavallette was more suited for kids our age. If we weren't looking for a party, we could enjoy some drinks on one of the many private beaches we technically weren't supposed to be on. To keep it brief, as we were driving down, we agreed to opt a quieter night without partying. We decided to grab a few beers, roll a joint, and chill on one of the private beaches under the stars. It sounded perfect. We had been going pretty hard with some of our other friends, and a break from partying was much needed. For those unfamiliar with the layout of Lavallette, there is a beach side and a bay side. Most of the beaches have really high dune and a step off as you approach. Most of the beaches have really high dune and a step off drop as you approach the ocean. Most of the beaches have a really high dune and a steep drop off as we approach the ocean. If you were to stand at the ocean's edge and you look back, you would see a pretty sizable hill of sand. After having a few drinks at Ricardo's place, we grabbed some bikes from the garage and we headed towards the beach. For some reason, Ricardo insisted on going further than we had ever been, which I didn't quite understand since all the beaches were basically the same. Eventually, Ricardo chose a desolate looking beach at the end of the road with no car parked on it. Every house on the street had its light off, which I actually preferred. This was back when weed was illegal in New Jersey, and we weren't too keen on getting caught. Plus, we had some drinks with us despite being only 19. We hid our bikes under some shrubs and made our way to the beach. We lit our joint and smoked under the stars, with the only sound being the light wave of the ocean. With the only sound being the light waves on the ocean and some accompanying wind. We got progressively drunker while filling air with laughter and conversation. Eventually, we just laid back in the sand, watching a sky full of stars, hoping to see a shooting star. That's when we heard it. I heard it first, a faint metallical buzzing, like the sound you'd hear in massive gymnasium with large overhead lights. I can't describe it any better. It was a faint metallical buzzing that couldn't possibly be anything at the beach. I sat up and stared at Ricardo, and I could tell the moment he started to hear it too. We wiped our heads into every direction, looking into the darkness for the source of the drone. But it was too faint to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. We were getting freaked out, but we were too terrified to move, assuming that whatever was making that noise would go away and we wouldn't have to worry about it. There was no way we could be seen from our spot on that beach. It was way too dark, and the sound of the ocean definitely drowned out any sound that we are making. I know it doesn't sound particularly scary, but my heart was pounding out of my chest. The drone continued. After a few more minutes, Ricardo gestured me to follow him. I nodded in argument. Living was definitely the best option, just like the scene from a movie. The droning went from a 1 to a 5. It wasn't a gradual shift. The sound literally increased in a split of a second, and it was definitely coming from our right. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and a wave of fear washed over me. Tensing my body from head to toe, we stared into the darkness and still didn't see anything. But now the drone sounded so close to us that we instinctively started running towards the sound dune. I didn't know what we were running from. All I know was that something was seriously wrong, and there was someone or something after us. As we were about halfway to the dune, Ricardo placed a firm hand on my shoulder, abruptly stopping me. At first, I was confused, but then I saw what his gaze was fixed on. I looked up towards the dune and saw it. A dark figure standing motionlessly at the peak of the dune. Its arms were freakishly long, almost reaching its knees. It was ridiculously tall, and I was shocked at how it managed to stand so still. It was truly terrifying. Ricardo shouted at me, breaking my gaze from the figure, and we continued running, this time parallel to the beach. We ran to the next dune entrance and sprinted up the slope. As we made our way to the peak, we looked back at where we had come from. I can still remember the terrifying sight that followed. Not only was the dark figure still on the dune, but there were maybe 3 or 4 more standing motionless on the slope. Each one looked like they were facing us. We didn't have time to go back for our bikes, instead opting to run the entire way home. The next morning, we retraced our steps, but couldn't find their bikes. Maybe they had been stolen, or maybe whoever or whatever was stalking us that night before had something to do with it. Either way, I've never experienced anything scarier on the beach, and still have trouble explaining most of these events. The weirdest things for me is that I was never able to determine what the buzzing drone was, and to this day, I have not heard anything even remotely close to it. Beaches has always terrified me. Well, not always. My fear is a direct result of what I'm about to tell you. As a kid, I used to love the shore. I remember spending many summers eagerly anticipating the weekends when my family and I would hang out at our beach house. Or if I was lucky, they'd get me to spend it at my friend Charles's beach house, which was even more fun. I was 6, and this was one of those special summer weekends. Me, Charles, and our third friend, Riley, were going to spend a few unsupervised days at Charles's beach house in LBI, or Long Beach Island. Riley was a year older than Charles and I, and had recently gotten his license. So we're driving down this car. The drive down was fantastic. Riley was a pretty uncoordinated driver at the time, so most of the ride was spent laughing at him, swearing and cursing the road. It was great. We got down to LBI in good time and immediately moved all of our stuff from the car to the rooms we'd be staying in. The layout of the house is important to the story, so I'll briefly mention it. There's a front door, a garage door that connects the back to the front yard, and a back upstairs deck that connects the upstairs bedrooms. There is also a spiral staircase that allows you to go directly from the back deck to the ground, so you can enter and exit the house from upstairs. The house sits along a lagoon, meaning the back end of the house faces a narrow channel of water with houses on the opposite side. We were at that ripe age where chasing girls was a priority, and the nice beach house all to ourselves was a perfect occasion. We spent a few hours figuring out which girls were down the shore at the time and talked to them on Snapchat. Finally, we found a group of 3 cute girls who said they'd be down to come kick back at the Charles's house. I had more than enough weed to last us the weekend, and we had snagged a few bottles of our parents' alcohol before leaving. It was perfect. Things were going very well. The 3 girls, Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie, were fun and flirty, and the 3 of us could tell where the night would probably end up. At one point, the 6 of us decided to smoke in Charles's backyard pool. It was small, but it was perfect for 6 drunk kids. I remember the sight vividly. The gentle breeze blowing through my hair, the steam from the heated water rising slowly with the puffs of smoke from the joints. At our age, this was bliss. But then, suddenly, Charles turned the music all the way down and stared over my shoulder into the darkness of the lagoon. Confused, I turned around, peering into the darkness. I could roughly make out the houses on the other side of the lagoon, but I wasn't quite sure what Charles was looking at. One of the girls asked Charles why he turned the music down, and he whispered that he saw someone standing in the dark opposite the house. I figured he was messing with us, so I started laughing. "Who cares, bro? People literally live here," I said. Charles shook his head. I know that family personally. My parents said they're in Florida for the week. All in honesty, I still thought it wasn't a big deal, or he was just messing around, so I kept chuckling. The girls were a little freaked out, and they said they wanted to go back inside. So the 6 of us started making our way out of the pool. As we were drying off in the yard, Riley jumped and cursed. Looking towards the lagoon, the rest of us turned, and even though the light was dim, I could definitely see what looked like the movement coming from the opposite dock. The 6 of us froze in place, trying to get a better glimpse of what we were looking at. Just then, a passing car on the road across from us lit up the scene ever so slightly, and the sight was so horrifying. There were 4 tall silhouettes standing at the edge of the dock, facing us. It was impossible to tell what they were wearing or what they looked like, but there was no doubt they were facing our direction. "Go inside now," said Charles with a shaky voice, mentioning us towards the sliding door. I've heard this thing sound that reminds the most terrifying noise I've ever heard. 4 consecutive splashes rang out from behind us. Those guys were swimming across the lagoon. We were in full-on panic mode at that point. The girls screamed while Riley slammed the sliding door shut and locked it. Charles quickly ran into the front door. Charles quickly ran to the front door to lock that door too, and the 6 of us ran to a room that wasn't visible from the outside. We waited in silence, horrified at what might be next. A few minutes passed, still nothing. Out of nowhere, Riley cursed, revealing us that he had forgotten to lock the sliding door again. Charles started to panic, knowing that this house was about to be broken into. Just then, we heard soft, quieted footsteps above us, and that was the last straw. None of us had any weapons on hand, and we were all intoxicated, so running was really our only option. The 6 of us sprinted for the front door, and bolted to the car, which really started up in a flash. The chaos of it all was too much for Rayleigh to handle, and he destroyed Charles's mailbox on the way out of the driveway. Once we were far enough away, we called the police. The ordeal was a nightmare. We went back to the house once police had searched it, but the news was shattering us. All the valuables on the top floor were missing. But that wasn't the worst part. Charles's family owned a medium-sized Boston Whaler boat, which was also stolen. Most likely as the gateway vehicle. Charles's father tended to keep a spare set of keys inside a small hatch below the steering wheel, which the police concluded was how the culprits got away so quickly. How they knew where the key was hidden is something I still wonder. The police were never able to arrest the perpetrators and likely will never. Charles, Riley and I think whoever robbed the house might have been someone who knew Charles's family and knew where the key was, and that the house was supposed to be vacant that weekend as well. It's been a long time since the chilling event took place, but I haven't let one day pass without locking every door and window in my home. Do yourself a favor and lock your doors at night.